following program is exclusively produced and distributed by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc., all rights reserved.
Hi, Golden Age film fanatics, and welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. My name is Dick Dinman, and our goal is to become your exclusive guide to the very best of the Golden Age classics coming out on DVD. We'll have reviews, breaking news of upcoming releases, plenty of surprise guests, and a special feature devoted to the great Golden Age film composers, which we call Cinemusic. So let's turn on the marquee and lights, camera, action.
It's time for Dick's Picks, in which I get to shine the spotlight on one of my Dick's Picks of the week.
Call me Shane.
George Stevens, creator of such masterpieces as Giant and his Academy Award-winning A Place in the Sun, enlarges the scope of the screen with a motion picture whose monumental background is matched by the stature of its moving human drama. Drama that began when a mysterious stranger rode in from out of nowhere to play a decisive role in the lives of these rugged pioneers.
Call me Shane.
Shane, who attracted the woman with his quiet strength, who fascinated the boy with the glint of his gun.
We'd all be much better off if there wasn't a single gun left in this valley.
A gun is as good or bad as the man using it.
From the clash of elemental forces, George Stevens has created a motion picture unforgettable for its spectacle and scope, its great human story, its deadly conflict.
I've heard about you.
What have you heard, Shane?
I've heard that you're a low-down Yankee liar.
When it comes to classic motion pictures, the word masterpiece has been bandied about with such reckless abandon of late that the word itself gradually becomes more and more suspicious when one considers the comparatively dubious cinema attractions that have been afforded this description. But when it comes to George Stevens' one-of-a-kind cinema work of genius entitled simply Shane, which has at last been granted the luminous 4K Blu Ray Technicolor restoration it so richly deserves, the true meaning of the word masterpiece becomes abundantly and entrancingly clear. The Oscar-winning photography, the fantastic Victor Young score, the daringly original picture and sound editing, the textured and multi-dimensional screenplay brought stunningly to life by a brilliant cast including Alan Ladd in the finest portrayal of his career, Jean Arthur, Van Heflin, and Brandon DeWitt all contribute to the unparalleled greatness of this iconic film. But make no mistake about it, this is a George Stevens film from first frame to last. And George Stevens remains, in my opinion, the finest filmmaker of all time. Period. As you may have gathered by now, I love this film above all others. Shane in the wonder of 4K Blu Ray is a one-of-a-kind experience to be savored repeatedly for a lifetime. And it is available now from Kino Lorber Home Entertainment. Even as we speak. Stay tuned for more Dick's Picks, coming up on DVD Classics Corner on the Air very soon. It is a signal honor that American award-winning film and television writer, director, producer, and founder of the American Film Institute, George Stevens, Jr., has consented yet again to join me on DVD Classics Corner on the Air for the third time to shed light on the production of one of his legendary father's masterworks, Shane. George Stevens, Jr. has received 11 Emmys, 2 Peabody Awards, and 8 Writers Guild of America Awards for his television productions, including the annual Kennedy Center Honors, Separate but Equal, and The Murder of Mary Fagan. And his production of The Thin Red Line was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Please join me in welcoming George Stevens, Jr. back to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. George Stevens, Jr., welcome back to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. It is especially wonderful to have you back because, as you know, on the 2 shows that you were kind enough to join me on your dad's Diary of Anne Frank and The Greatest Story Ever Told, I kept bemoaning the lack of Shane on Blu Ray. Shane is the movie of any movie I've ever seen, for a variety of reasons, more emotionally tied to than any other film I've ever seen. So I'm going to try to remain coherent during our chat about this, my favorite film.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we will be in harmony.
Well, good. And what I'm going to attempt to do in this show, because Shane, the movie, is basically seen through the eyes of a young boy played by Brandon DeWitt in an Academy Award-nominated performance. What I'm hoping to achieve is your memories of the inception, preparation, production, and post-production of Shane as seen through a 19-year-old production assistant named George Stevens, Jr. So that is going to be my goal, and it goes without saying I've been looking forward to this for some time.
It'll be a pleasure to talk about it.
I'm absolutely blown away by it. I've seen it 3 times, run it 3 times since I've received it a few weeks ago, and this is exactly the way I remember seeing the film. First time I saw it as literally a little boy was in a revival together with, and I forget, either Stalag 17 or Roman Holiday. I forgot which, but it was on a reissued double bill. I've seen the film, I would estimate, without exaggeration, maybe 100 times since. First thing I want to ask you, you must have been the very first or close to the first individual who became aware of the fact that your father, George Stevens, wanted to make Shane as his 3rd Paramount, and as it turned out, final Paramount film. Do you remember when he first told you that? And did you read the book? Was the script already written? What was your reaction initially?
The summer after I graduated from high school, my father offered me some work. And I had 2 jobs. One was to break down Theodore Dreiser's American Tragedy, listing every scene, because he was about to make A Place in the Sun. The other was to read material that came over from Paramount. And there were a lot of tedious things for a 17-year-old to read. But one item was a small novel that I read in an afternoon. And I went over to see my father that night. He was in bed reading. And I said, Dad, you ought to read this book. It's really a good story. And he said, why don't you tell me the story? So I found myself pacing around his bedroom trying to tell him the story of Shane. And a year later, we were up in Jackson Hole making the picture.
What about the reaction of Paramount? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that your dad's stay at Paramount during 3 films was not exactly the happiest, because from what I hear initially, Paramount vehemently did not want to do A Place in the Sun because it was based on a Theodore Dreiser novel called An American Tragedy, which Paramount had actually filmed in the early 30s and was a box office flop. And I hear they threw all kinds of roadblocks in your dad's direction. I'm talking about Shane, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have heard that the production head or head of production at Paramount was named Y. Frank Freeman. And is it true your dad always referred to him as Y. Frank Freeman? Is that true?
Not always, but often. Paramount was of the mind that while they were initially kind of interested in it, that television was filled with Westerns, Hopalong Cassidy and things of that sort, and they felt that Westerns were not in vogue. So they were somewhat resistant, and originally Montgomery Clift was going to play Shane, and William Holden was going to play the Van Heflin part. And Montgomery Clift, who'd done A Place in the Sun with my father, suddenly changed his mind.
Did he tell you why, or did he make his reasons apparent?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But the net effect was then Paramount lost confidence in it. And one day my father went in to see why Frank Freeman, and said, let me see your list of contract people that you have pictures with. And he said, Alan Ladd, he said he could play Shane, and he went down a little further. He said Van Heflin, he'd be fine as the other man. And, Jean Arthur, she's always been good for me. Let's let her play the woman. And Paramount had a change of heart and went ahead with the picture.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the casting of Alan Ladd in a George Stevens production rather controversial because of the fact that Alan Ladd was a superstar at Paramount, but virtually always, with the exception of a filming of The Great Gatsby, which failed, virtually always in genre films, film noir, tough guy, that kind of a thing. And his films were always profitable, but only to a certain extent. Wasn't Paramount a little afraid that this would be a very expensive undertaking for a film headlined by Alan Ladd?
I think they were cautious, and Alan Pakula, the late Alan Pakula, who became a wonderful director, was an assistant in the front office at Paramount. And after Shane had been filmed and edited, but not quite complete, Paramount showed it to Howard Hughes, who ran another studio, and Hughes offered them $3 million for it, the amount of money that the picture cost. And Paramount sold it to him, and Alan Ladd told me they were so happy that they got it off their hands. And then Hughes reneged on the deal, and Shane came back to them, and they were stuck with one of the most successful pictures Paramount had to that time. And part of the Paramount thinking was, according to Alan Pakula, the Paramount people were happy to have gotten rid of it because they said no Alan Ladd film had ever made $3 million. And Alan commented, what they didn't understand, the executives at Paramount, was that this wasn't an Alan Ladd film. This was a George Stevens film.
We pause now for station identification.
DVD Classics Corner on the Air is exclusively produced and released by Dick Dinman's Double D Productions, Inc. All rights reserved.
George, I just find it difficult to believe that on the spot your dad would okay Alan Ladd based upon his past films. I mean, he always had a terrific presence.
Dick, my father had a lot of confidence in himself. And he worked with actors who were not, always those with the biggest reputations. Elizabeth Taylor had never done anything quite like
Place in the
Sun before he cast her in that. Rock Hudson was not known for the level of performance that he gave in Giant.
And now that I think of it, Shelley Winters was certainly not on the face of it right for the third lead in A Place in the Sun, because she'd been playing mostly glamour girls in Universal International films. So yes, what you're saying makes perfect sense. But I have to tell you this. I looked over, I happen to be an Alan Ladd fan, and I ran a film that Alan Ladd had made in 1948, his first Western, his first Technicolor film called Whispering Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And the parallels were rather extraordinary, because he plays a railroad agent whose best friend is Robert Preston, but who is married to a woman that Ladd loves, and she loves him back, and the woman's name is Marion, the same as in Shane.
What a coincidence.
Marion. Hello, Marion.
It's just a woman's curiosity. But why haven't you ever married?
Well, never thought I had enough to offer. At least the one girl I had in mind.
Then you did have someone in mind.
Yes, I had someone in mind, all right.
Was she attractive?
I thought so.
Then you never got around to asking her. To marry you, I mean.
No, I never did.
Do you think that was fair to the girl? Maybe she was just waiting for you to ask her. Why didn't you let her decide, Luke? Why didn't you? The years passed so quickly.
I know. Well, there's nothing can be done about it now.
No.
The parallels just hit me home, because in that film also, which was a good, ordinary, run-of-the-mill Paramount Western, Ladd showed a certain sensitivity and warmth that your dad exploited totally in Shane. One of the hallmarks of a George Stevens film is actors at their very best consistently. And as an actor, as an ex-actor, I'm very curious, and you may have been witness to this. You have Alan Ladd, who'd never appeared in a top-quality film with a major director. You have Jean Arthur, who was, by reputation, rather skittish, and in fact had dropped out of Born Yesterday on Broadway because of her, I guess, stage fright. You've got a child who did one film beforehand, Brandon DeWitt, member of The Wedding, recreating his Broadway role. How did your dad communicate, for instance, with Alan Ladd? What would he tell them? Did he allow them to come in with their own ideas? Did he set the scene for them? Did he give him line readings? What did he do to coax those great performances?
Well, the first thing he always did, he created a set, a working situation, which was comfortable for the actors. He never allowed assistant directors to shout quiet or, there was always to have a very congenial mood for working. And he had patience. And he, I think, inspired their confidence in themselves. And I just saw him do that throughout his career with Millie Perkins, later in The Diary of Anne Frank. And he also shot a lot of film, and he had very good taste in editing. If there were passages where the actor wasn't good, that would never end up in the finished film. He would find the right choice in each part of each scene to show the actors to advantage to the character they were creating.
Let's just isolate Alan Ladd, because his casting was so unusual. The man had an innate magnetism, but from all reports was not the most secure actor, which unfortunately manifested itself after Shane. Would George Stevens spend a lot of time with him prior to filming, discussing the importance of the scene, the backstory, specifically what he wanted?
No, I think not a great deal of that. I think it was more when they're in the scene that you're making the actor comfortable. And the thing I would hear him say to most often to actors was, okay, let's do one more. Let's keep it very simple. He didn't want actors to be, quote, acting. And I think he achieved that.
From what I hear, he was very satisfied with Alan Ladd's ultimate performance. And this is something that's rather difficult to believe for me, is that Alan Ladd was strongly considered for the jet rink role in Giant. This is something that's repeated constantly, but I don't see how he could have played the first half of the film as a young man.
I was not around at that time. I know Alan was mentioned, but you never know whether that was just a situation of, extending a courtesy to an actor. My friend Robert Wagner told me not too long ago, he was really expressing his admiration for my father. And he said that I called George and said I really needed to see him, and I went over and talked to him, and I said, I really can play jet rink, and I know this is a role that I could really do for you and do it wonderfully. And he said, I never forget, George. He kind of looked at me and he says, well, RJ, he said, you would be wonderful as Jet Rink. He said, but I've got something else in mind for this one. And RJ, looking back 40 years later, said, I was no more prepared to play Jet Rink.
Yeah.
But I walked out of that office feeling like $1 million.
Yeah. How did Paramount react when your dad proposed taking the production to Jackson Hole, Wyoming? Paramount had possibly the worst and the most artificial-looking western town on their lot. They may still have it, for all I know. How did they react when you... Because this must have added $1 million to the budget.
Yeah, I really don't know the answer to that, but I knew that the whole concept, my father had a sense of the West going back to the days when he was a young cameraman on a series of silent films called Rex, the King of Wild Horses, up in Utah. And so he really had a sense of to give this the authenticity of the Old West.
All you need to do is to take a look at, for instance, the wardrobe, specifically Jean Arthur's wardrobe, to realize how authentic it is. I have a question about the screenplay, which was written by A.B. Guthrie Jr., but it says additional dialogue by Jack Sher. Now, I knew Jack Sher, and Jack Sher's career at Paramount previously, and I think afterwards, consisted primarily, if I'm not mistaken, of Bob Hope comedies. What did Jack Sher contribute to the screenplay, or do you not?
I remember Bud Guthrie, A.B. Guthrie, the Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist, came and worked on Shane, but he had to get back to Indiana, where he was teaching. He was a professor, and so he left before we went on location. And Jack Sher came up, and he worked on polishing dialogue for some scenes. I really couldn't describe what particular scenes he was involved in.
The miracle of the screenplay for me is that it's so textured. It takes two sides to every issue. For instance, if you think about it, I think I would guess that Shane, essentially, the film, wants to convey the gravity and deadliness of guns, which would not please the NRA. But on the other hand, one of the most famous speeches in Shane is the main character, Alan Ladd, as Shane, justifying the use of a gun. I find that extraordinary.
Oh, you see, Joey? Now look, remember now, when your hand comes up, you still have room to clear your holster.
Shane?
Oh, hello, Mrs. Starr. I was just teaching Joey how to do a little shooting.
I don't want little
You
children.
ought to see Shane shoot now.
I did, Joey.
He's teaching me to shoot.
Yes, I know, dear. Now you run along, get ready for the party.
Oh, Mom!
Go on, Joey. Guns aren't going to be my boy's life.
Why do you always have to spoil everything? Bang! Bang!
A gun is a tool, Miriam. No better, no worse than any other tool. An axe, a shovel, or anything. A gun is as good or as bad as the man using it. Remember that.
And also, you've got a so-called villain in Riker. And,
yes.
And Riker has one scene where he talks about why he is the way he is. And during those moments, you almost think, oh, I get it. He's not, I understand where he's coming from.
You've made things pretty hard for us, Riker. And us in the right all the time.
Right! You in the right. Look, Stark. When I come to this country, you weren't much older than your boy there. We had rough times. Me and other men that are mostly dead now. I got a bad shoulder yet from a Cheyenne arrowhead. We made this country. Found it and we made it. Worked blood and empty bellies. Cattle we brought in were hazed off by Indians and rustlers. Don't bother you much anymore because we handled them. We made a safe range out of this. Some of us died doing it. We made it. And then people move in who never had a rawhide through the old days. They fence off my range and fence me off from water. Some of them, like you, plow ditches, take out irrigation water. And so the creek runs dry sometimes. I've got to move my stock because of it. And you say we have no right to the range. The men that did the work and ran the risks have no rights?
It's one of the most multi-dimensional textured scripts I think I've ever seen.
Well, I think that's true, and it's certainly one of its strengths. I think here Riker, sort of the leader of the what you would call in a normal Western the bad guys. The first words out of his mouth are, "I don't want any trouble."
Right.
And later he says to Joe Starrett, "I'm a reasonable man." And I think that, in all respects, that there's a certain complexity in the character relationships of Shane, which gives it more dimension than most Western pictures have.
The thing is, what I see, every time I see Shane, it's a new experience because I'm discovering something new. And it seems to me that your dad had a trust and respect for his audience that was virtually unequaled. He didn't spell everything out.
When I'm asked, Dick, having worked with my father for, some time when I was young, what was the most important thing you learned from him? My answer is always, I learned respect for the audience. Because, in those days, the studios kind of like to say, well, the audience has a mentality of a 14-year-old. and Dad really felt that he talked about the electricity of 5,000 minds, people in the music hall, all reacting at the same time to a film, the energy of that. And he did. He trusted the audience.
What's fascinating to me, as well as I know the film and I know every beat intimately, every time I run it, I discover something new.
George Stevens was conscious of how easily an audience could be taken out of a story, that something false would subliminally reduce their engagement. And he was very concerned about the look of Shane, and he didn't like the term costume. You had the costume department.
Mm-hmm.
He liked the word clothes. And there was a man that worked with him named Joe DeYoung, and he wrote him a memo. And he said, none of these cowboys or sodbusters or women in this story were ever advised by an artist other than their own sensibility to enhance their appearance in regard to anything that they would wear. They didn't have Western Costume Company to make them look attractive and conspicuous.
Mm-hmm.
I make this point strong, Joe, because it seems everybody's effort, actors, wardrobe people, and all, is to make them look as much like Western movie actors as possible. And he didn't want that.
It also shows in the construction of the town, which is
Right.
not your typical town. There's I think, if you can call it a main mud street, but there are only buildings on one side of the street.
Well, he had an explanation for that, Dick. He said the reason that Western streets in movies had two sides, unlike the one-sided street in Shane, was that if the other side of the street wasn't there, you'd see Culver City.
Yeah.
We went up location scouting and rode in jeeps all over that landscape in the Teton Valley, with the Teton Peaks looming a mile above us. And he, at one point, what the photographer Cartier-Bresson called the decisive moment, I remember him saying to the production designer, put 3 stakes in the ground. And in those 3 stakes, they planted small aspen trees. And those 3 trees on the top of the hillside became the portal, became everybody who came into town and drove down into the valley to Grafton Saloon past those trees. So it was a signature, and every time you saw someone pass those trees, you knew they were approaching the town.
Here's something that's a a cause of great controversy and discussion, sometimes in other movies. Does Shane die at the end? Is he, in fact, dying? There's one movie, and I forget which one, released about 10 years ago, where the two characters talk about the ending of Shane.
Oh, yeah.
And one character, I think one of them was Kevin Spacey, and one character says, well, you know, he rides away, slumped over, he never looks back, he goes through the graveyard, he's hunched over, and the other one says, no, he'll be fine. What was the intention? Does Shane live, or is he on his way to die?
I think we go back to respect for the audience. I think that Dad told that story and wants the audience to have a chance to make their ending.
Fine, what's yours? I'm pinning you down. Does he live or die?
He lives.
Okay. I prefer that anyway. One more thing. I want to discuss screen ratio, if I may, because obviously Shane was, I believe, one of the last films shot in the Academy, the Square Academy ratio of 3.7, something like that. And Paramount blew it up for the Radio City premiere to, I think, 1.66 or something like that, cutting off the top and the bottom of the screen. Was your dad aware of that? Did he have any reaction at the time?
Yeah, we were aware of it. The Robe had just come out. It was all about widescreen, and actually he went along with it for that opening release. I don't know how many places it was shown that way, but it was shown that way at the music hall and a few other places.
It didn't bother him.
Well, he didn't, you know, he didn't like it, but it was a trade-off, and it did have, you know, it filled the new big screen at the music hall so you had the trade-off of a bigger picture with more impact, with some harm to the framing.
I haven't seen Shane looking this good in more than a decade. I have the original DVD, which by comparison is laughable. In fact, if you like, I'll sell you the DVD as a coaster. But how specifically did you work to get it to look this incredible? Is the negative in good shape? Did you... I mean, I've never... It looks like a new film.
The negative is in good shape, and you can do wonderful things with all of the color correction and different tools that they have now. The problem with it is that if someone uses those tools and doesn't know what the original film looked like, you very often end up with a somewhat different film. We had the benefit of my knowledge of the film, and I sat in the room and went through the picture frame by frame with the technicians, and we really worked hard to make the day for night scenes, the scenes that in those days were shot during the daytime but lit for night and are very hard to control. We made them look better than they've looked in a long time. And my father liked kind of darkness in scenes, and we made sure the darkness stayed there because the tendency is the technicians may want to make it brighter because more studio films of those days were bright. And so my job was to make sure this looked as close to George Stevens' original concept for it as possible.
And the extent to which you succeeded is very evident when you look at the trailer, which is included on the Blu Ray, where, as I remember, the night scenes are as bright as daylight.
Oh, that's when I used to get so discouraged when I'd see it on television, and what were night scenes would be shown for day.
You have been so generous with your time, George. I know you're in Maine. On vacation, I assume.
I am looking at the Penobscot Bay, and it's very beautiful and a soothing view for this pleasant conversation with you.
Well, I'm just a few miles away from you. George, again, you have been so generous.
It's always a pleasure, Dick.
Well, that's my show for today. DVD Classics Corner on the Air is conceived, written, produced, and directed by me, Double D. So,
keep well, keep happy, and keep listening.